Most people pulling a frozen waffle from their freezer this morning have no idea that what they just dropped into the toaster is not food in any traditional sense of that word. It is a constructed product, an engineered rectangle designed in a laboratory, optimized for shelf life, manufactured at industrial scale and sold to you inside a box covered in imagery of golden kitchens and wholesome family breakfasts that have absolutely nothing to do with what is actually inside the packaging. We went through 10 of the most purchased frozen waffle brands in America. We pulled ingredient lists, cross-referenced independent laboratory findings, traced ownership structures, reviewed FDA enforcement records, examined class action litigation, and followed the supply chain on every single brand back to the corporation that actually controls what goes into the product you are feeding your family before school on a Tuesday morning. What came back was worse than we expected, and we expected it to be bad. 7 out of 10 brands contain ingredient combinations that independent nutritional researchers have flagged as actively harmful with regular consumption. 4 of the 10 have faced legal action over label claims that were directly contradicted by what the product actually contained. 2 brands that carry certification seals implying careful, clean, intentional production were found to be owned by the same industrial food conglomerate operating a supply chain that those seals were never designed to survive contact with. And the brand sitting at number 1, the one that has become the default recommendation across parenting blogs, school nutrition discussions, and pediatric dietary advice columns for the last decade, came back with a finding that should make every parent who has ever felt good about buying it sit down before they finish reading. Here is what the boxes are not telling you. The worst results did not come from the brands that look cheap. They came from the ones with whole grain stamps on the front, the ones with natural flavors printed in reassuring lowercase, the ones with added protein claims and fiber counts and vitamin fortifications that imply someone, somewhere, made a careful decision about your child's health before sealing that box. Nobody made that decision. A procurement team made a margin decision. The nutrition claims were constructed afterward to justify the price. We are counting down all 10 from concerning to genuinely alarming, finishing with the 3 that came back clean, that actually contain what a waffle is supposed to contain, and are worth putting in your cart. Let us get into it. Number 10. Kirkland's Signature Belgian Waffles. This is the Costco one. The bulk buy. The one that feels like responsible, efficient, value-conscious shopping because you are getting a large quantity of something that sounds premium for a price that feels impossible to argue with. Belgian. That single word is doing significant work on that packaging before you open anything. Kirkland's Signature is Costco's private label. Costco does not operate waffle production facilities. They do not employ food scientists developing proprietary Belgian waffle formulations. They have supplier contracts. Those contracts go to whoever can deliver product at the volume, the specification, and the price point required to move pallets through a warehouse retail model. The manufacturer behind Kirkland frozen waffles is not disclosed on the packaging in any form that allows a consumer to evaluate their production standards, their quality control history, or their ingredient sourcing practices. The Kirkland name is the accountability structure. And the Kirkland name belongs to a membership retailer, not a food producer with a traceable supply chain. Read the ingredient list on Kirkland Belgian waffles. Enriched flour is the first ingredient. Enriched means the flour was stripped of its natural nutritional content through industrial milling and then had synthetic vitamins added back in to replace what processing removed. You are not buying a nutritious product. You are buying a stripped product with synthetic nutrition layered back on top and sold at bulk pricing that makes the quantity feel like the value. The second through fifth ingredients include sugar, partially hydrogenated soybean oil in some formulations, and a list of emulsifiers and leavening agents that are the functional signature of industrial production rather than anything resembling how a waffle is actually made. The Belgian designation has no legal definition in the United States for a frozen product. It means nothing. It is a word chosen because it made the box more likely to be placed in a cart. Costco generates over $230 billion in annual revenue. The sourcing and production infrastructure to make a genuinely clean frozen waffle at reasonable cost exists at that scale. This is a margin decision wrapped in a word that sounded better than plain. Number 9. Great Value Home-Style Waffles. This is the Walmart version. Less than $3 for a box that will last a family a week. The price point is the entire proposition, and for families managing a grocery budget, that proposition is completely legitimate. Affordable breakfast protein and carbohydrate that goes from freezer to toaster in 90 seconds has genuine utility in a household where time and money are both constrained. The problem is not the price. The problem is what is behind it. Great Value is Walmart's private label. Walmart does not make waffles. The manufacturer producing Great Value waffles can change from one procurement cycle to the next with zero visible signal to the person pulling the box off the shelf. The ingredient list stays approximately the same. The production standards of whoever won the latest contract do not have to. FDA inspection records of frozen breakfast product facilities supplying major retailer private label products have documented findings including inadequate allergen controls, improper temperature maintenance during processing, and sanitation deficiencies. Those findings are public record. They are also functionally invisible to a consumer whose only interface with the product is a blue and white box that says Great Value. The ingredient panel on Great Value home-style waffles includes calcium propionate, a preservative that peer-reviewed research published in the Journal of Pediatrics and Child Health has connected to irritability, restlessness, and inattention in children following consumption. It is in millions of children's breakfast foods across the country. There is no required disclosure of the behavioral research on the label. The preservative is listed, the research is not. Walmart generated over $648 billion in revenue last year. The financial capacity to source cleaner ingredients is not the constraint. The margin calculation is the constraint. The 80 cents you saved on this box came with something that was never listed in the price. Number 8. Eggo Bran and Blueberry Waffles. Before we talk about this specific product, the Eggo name itself deserves a clear statement of ownership because most people buying Eggo have no idea who is actually making their breakfast. Eggo is owned by Kellogg's, now operating as Kellanova following a corporate restructuring. Kellanova generates approximately $13 billion in annual revenue. The friendly Eggo branding, the decades of Saturday morning cartoon advertising, the cultural familiarity so deep that the product appears in prestige television as a nostalgia shorthand, all of it exists as a brand layer sitting on top of a $13 billion industrial food operation. The bran and blueberry variety is where the health positioning becomes specifically problematic. Bran implies fiber. Blueberry implies antioxidants and real fruit. The combination implies that someone made a nutritionally intentional product for a consumer trying to make a better choice at breakfast. Look at the blueberry content. The blueberries in Eggo Bran and Blueberry Waffles are not blueberries in any form a blueberry bush produced. They are blueberry-flavored bits, constructed from sugar, corn syrup, palm oil, modified cornstarch, and artificial blueberry flavoring. There is no actual blueberry in the product. The antioxidant profile you assumed came with the blueberry label does not exist in the waffle. It exists in the imagery on the box. In 2011, a class action lawsuit was filed against Kellogg's, specifically challenging health and nutrition claims made on Eggo packaging. The case centered on whether the whole grain and nutritional benefit claims on multiple Eggo products were materially misleading to consumers. Kellogg's settled the litigation. The labeling language was adjusted. The core formulation architecture of enriched flour, sugar, and constructed fruit flavoring continued. $13 billion in annual revenue. Real blueberries are not a budget constraint at that scale. They are a margin decision. The brand is real. The blueberries are a word on a box. Number 7. Kashi Frozen Waffles. This is the one that surprises people most in this section of the list. Kashi built its brand identity on a specific and sincere promise. Whole grains, minimal processing, ingredients that looked like food rather than a chemistry inventory. The packaging is earthy, understated, intentionally different from the bright primary colors of mainstream frozen breakfast products. It looks like a brand that is operating by different principles than everything else in the freezer aisle. Kashi is owned by Kellanova, the same $13 billion parent company behind Eggo. The brand that positions itself as the alternative to industrial breakfast food is a product line inside the same industrial breakfast food corporation. When Kellanova absorbed Kashi, the supply chain followed. Ingredient sourcing decisions at Kashi do not happen in isolation from the procurement infrastructure of a $13 billion operation. They happen inside it. The whole grain credentials on Kashi frozen waffles are real in the sense that whole grain flour is present. What the whole grain label does not tell you is the glycemic load of that whole grain once it has been processed, frozen, and reheated in a toaster, which behaves in the body significantly differently than the same grain eaten in a minimally processed form. Kashi waffles contain cane sugar, tapioca syrup, and rice flour in combinations that produce a glycemic response independent nutritional researchers have noted is considerably higher than the whole grain branding implies to the health-conscious consumer choosing this product over a conventional waffle. The person buying Kashi instead of Eggo believes they are making a meaningfully different nutritional choice. The independent glycemic data suggests the difference is considerably smaller than the price gap between the two boxes. Kellanova charges a premium for the Kashi brand positioning. That premium is funded by a consumer who trusts the whole grain identity without knowing it is managed by the same corporation making the conventional product they switched away from. Number 6. Nature's Path Organic Frozen Waffles. Still in the organic premium tier, still carrying the certification that health-conscious parents reach for specifically because they believe it guarantees a meaningfully different product. Nature's Path has positioned itself as an independent, values-driven, family-owned company that operates by principles the mainstream industry does not share. On the ownership question, Nature's Path remains privately held and independent, which separates it from the acquisition stories of Kashi and Eggo. That distinction is real and worth acknowledging. What the independent ownership does not resolve is the ingredient architecture of the frozen waffle product itself. Nature's Path organic waffles contain organic cane sugar, organic palm oil, and a leavening system that includes multiple synthetic compounds permitted under USDA organic standards because the certification governs how ingredients were grown, not what chemical processes they undergo afterward. The organic certification on a frozen waffle verifies that the grain was grown without synthetic pesticides. It does not verify the glycemic load of the finished product. It does not verify that the palm oil sourcing meets any environmental standard beyond the minimum the certification requires. Palm oil, organic or otherwise, carries a saturated fat profile that the American Heart Association flags as contributing to cardiovascular risk with regular consumption. It is in Nature's Path organic waffles because it produces the texture and shelf stability the product format requires at a cost the business model supports. It is not there because someone made a careful decision about the long-term cardiovascular health of the families paying a premium for the organic label. Nature's Path is a better choice than the conventional brands above it on this list. It is not the clean product its pricing and certification imply to the parent standing in the freezer aisle trying to make the right decision for their children. Number 5. Pillsbury Frozen Waffles. Pillsbury is one of the most recognizable names in American food. The Doughboy, the crescent rolls, the biscuit cans that have been in refrigerator cases since before most current parents were born. The brand carries a level of cultural familiarity that functions as its own form of consumer confidence. Familiar means safe. Familiar means it has been around long enough that any serious problems would have surfaced by now. Pillsbury is owned by the Smucker Company following a complex series of acquisitions. The Smucker Company generates approximately $8 billion in annual revenue across a product portfolio that includes Jif, Folgers, and a range of other household staples. The Doughboy is a licensing asset. The waffle production is a contracted manufacturing operation. Pillsbury frozen waffles contain Datem, a dough conditioner whose full name is diacetyl tartaric acid ester of mono and diglycerides. Datem is derived from animal or vegetable fats through a chemical modification process and is used in industrial baking to improve dough strength and gas retention. It is not an ingredient any home cook has ever reached for. It exists in this product because it solves a manufacturing problem in high-volume frozen waffle production, not because it belongs in breakfast food. The ingredient list also includes sodium caseinate, a milk-derived protein that functions as an emulsifier and appears in products labeled as dairy-free in some configurations because it is a derivative rather than a direct dairy ingredient. For individuals with milk allergies rather than lactose intolerance, sodium caseinate can trigger reactions. The allergen disclosure on Pillsbury waffles meets the legal minimum. The distinction between a dairy derivative and dairy itself is not explained anywhere on the packaging that a parent scanning a box in 30 seconds would notice. Smucker generates $8 billion a year. Reformulating without Datem and with transparent allergen architecture is not a production constraint at that scale. It is a cost constraint. And the cost constraint won. Number 4. Vans gluten-free frozen waffles. This is where the investigation reaches the betrayal tier. Vans has built an identity in the specialty health food market that goes beyond mainstream organic positioning. Gluten-free is not a lifestyle preference for most of the people buying this product. It is a medical requirement. Individuals with celiac disease, non-celiac gluten sensitivity, and wheat allergies are buying Vans specifically because the gluten-free label represents a safety guarantee, not a nutritional preference. Vans is owned by Boulder Brands, which was acquired by Pinnacle Foods, which was subsequently acquired by Conagra Brands. Conagra generates over $12 billion in annual revenue. The Vans brand, the independent health food identity, the specialty positioning that made the brand trusted by medically vulnerable consumers, is a marketing asset inside a $12 billion industrial food company. In 2014, Vans Foods was the subject of an FDA warning letter related to labeling and manufacturing practice concerns at production facilities. FDA warning letters are not issued for minor administrative discrepancies. They are issued when inspectors find meaningful violations of food safety regulations that the company has not corrected through normal compliance channels. Beyond the regulatory history, the ingredient architecture of Vans gluten-free waffles includes a significant amount of rice flour, tapioca starch, and potato starch combinations that produce a glycemic response meaningfully higher than the whole grain adjacent health positioning of the brand implies. A person with celiac disease buying Vans because it is medically necessary is not choosing this product for its glycemic profile, but a person with type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance who is buying Vans because the health food positioning implies overall nutritional quality is receiving a product whose blood sugar impact has not been disclosed with anything close to the prominence of the gluten-free claim that drove the purchase. The medically vulnerable population this brand markets to deserves full transparency across every nutritional dimension, not just the single metric that generates the purchase. Conagra's $12 billion operation has the resources to provide that transparency. The commercial calculation has kept the label where it is. If this investigation is already changing how you see the frozen breakfast aisle, stay with us. Because number 3 is a brand that millions of parents have actively sought out based on specific health research. And what we found should change that recommendation completely. Number 3. Eggo Nutri-Grain Waffles. We return to Kellanova for the entry that demands the most scrutiny on this entire list because the Nutri-Grain positioning represents a specific and targeted claim about nutritional value that independent analysis directly challenges. Nutri-Grain implies nutrient density. It implies a product designed around the grain's natural nutritional profile rather than the stripped and re-enriched profile of standard refined flour products. The name was chosen with precision because it communicates exactly what a health-aware consumer in a grocery store needs to hear in 2 words before they put the box in their cart. Nutri-Grain waffles from Eggo contain enriched flour as the primary ingredient. Enriched flour. The same stripped and synthetically refortified base that the Nutri-Grain branding exists to make the consumer believe they are avoiding. The whole grain content in the product is present, but not the primary ingredient by weight. The name Nutri-Grain is not regulated as a nutritional claim in the United States in the way that low-fat or high-fiber are regulated. It is a brand name. It carries the association of nutritional benefit without the legal obligation to deliver it. The sugar content in Eggo Nutri-Grain waffles across multiple flavor varieties ranges from 11 to 14 grams per 2 waffle serving. The American Heart Association recommends that children aged 2 to 18 consume no more than 25 grams of added sugar per day across all sources. 2 Eggo Nutri-Grain waffles at breakfast, without syrup, without juice, without any other morning food, consumes more than half of that daily ceiling before the school day begins. That information is on the label, in 7-point type. Beside information about iron and calcium and B vitamins that were added back after the processing that made the Nutri-Grain name necessary in the first place. The name is prominent. The sugar math is not. Kellanova spent $13 billion in revenue last year. The resources to reformulate Nutri-Grain waffles with a genuinely whole grain primary ingredient and a sugar profile consistent with what the brand name promises to a parent trying to make a good decision exist completely within that budget. The margin calculation decided otherwise. The name stayed. The grain was enriched anyway. Number 2. Hungry Jack Pancakes and Waffle Mix Frozen Waffles. Hungry Jack sits at a specific position in this investigation because it represents something the other brands on this list have mostly avoided having on public record. Hungry Jack is owned by the Smucker Company, and the brand's frozen breakfast products have accumulated an FDA enforcement history that goes beyond labeling concerns into documented production standard failures. Facility inspection records associated with contract manufacturers producing Hungry Jack branded frozen products have included findings of inadequate pest control measures, improper separation of allergen-containing products during production, and temperature control deficiencies during freezing and storage phases. These are not theoretical risks. Temperature control failures in frozen food production create real conditions for pathogen growth in products that are being placed in the toasters of households with children. The ingredient list includes high-fructose corn syrup, an ingredient that peer-reviewed research published across multiple journals including Metabolism and the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition has linked to fatty liver disease development, insulin resistance progression, and cardiovascular disease risk factors when consumed regularly. Hungry Jack frozen waffles are designed to be consumed regularly. They are a weekly grocery purchase for the families buying them. The product is designed for frequency. The high-fructose corn syrup is there for every single serving of that frequency. High-fructose corn syrup has been voluntarily removed from the ingredient lists of dozens of major food products over the last decade because of exactly this research. The brands taking consumer health seriously made that decision years ago. Hungry Jack did not. The ingredient is cheap. The research is inconvenient. The label says homestyle. The formulation says margin. Number 1. Aunt Jemima, now rebranded as Pearl Milling Company Frozen Waffles. This is the one. The rebrand happened in 2021 following widespread public attention to the racial history of the Aunt Jemima brand identity. The name changed. The logo changed. The box changed. The press coverage of the rebrand reached audiences who had not previously thought critically about this product in years. What did not change was the formulation. What did not change was the ownership. Pearl Milling Company frozen waffles are a PepsiCo product through the Quaker Oats Company subsidiary. PepsiCo generates over $91 billion in annual revenue. The rebrand was a brand management decision. It was not a product quality decision. It was not a supply chain transparency decision. It was not a reformulation decision. The waffle in the box before the rebrand and the waffle in the box after the rebrand are the same waffle. That waffle contains partially hydrogenated oil in legacy formulations, high fructose corn syrup, artificial flavors, calcium propionate, DADM sodium caseinate, yellow 5 and yellow 6 synthetic food dyes. Under European Union regulations, products containing yellow 5 and yellow 6 are required to carry a mandatory warning label stating that the product may have an adverse effect on activity and attention in children. That warning exists in Europe because the research on these dyes and pediatric behavioral effects was sufficient for European regulators to require disclosure. In the United States, the same dyes are used freely in children's breakfast products with no equivalent disclosure requirement. Pearl Milling Company waffles are marketed extensively to families with children. The box imagery features children. The serving occasion is children's breakfast. The synthetic dyes connected to behavioral effects in children by the research that European regulators responded to are inside every box marketed to those children with no label that would prompt a parent to investigate further. PepsiCo generated over $91 billion last year. Reformulating without synthetic dyes and high-fructose corn syrup is not a financial constraint for a company at that scale. It is a decision that has been made and continues to be made in the direction of the ingredient that costs less rather than the ingredient that does less harm. The rebrand changed what the box looked like. The waffle is still the same waffle. And the families who responded to the rebrand by feeling better about the product they were already buying were given a new name to trust while the formulation that warranted scrutiny stayed exactly where it was. Now that you know what to put back in the freezer, here are the 3 that held up. These are not compromise picks. These are products that contain what a waffle is supposed to contain, made by operations that have not substituted a cheaper version of every key ingredient and then covered the substitution with a certification seal and a heritage story. Best option number 3. Trader Joe's whole wheat frozen waffles. Trader Joe's occupies a specific and defensible position in this category for reasons that are structural rather than merely reputational. Trader Joe's private label products are manufactured under supplier agreements that require compliance with Trader Joe's own ingredient standards, which prohibit a meaningful list of additives and artificial ingredients that appear across almost every brand on the avoid list. Trader Joe's whole wheat frozen waffles contain whole wheat flour as the primary ingredient, not enriched flour with whole grain added. Whole wheat flour. The ingredient list is short enough to read in 15 seconds. Water, whole wheat flour, expeller pressed oil, eggs, sugar, leavening agents, salt. No datem, no calcium propionate, no high fructose corn syrup, No synthetic dyes, no artificial flavors, no ingredients whose names exist because a manufacturing problem needed a chemical solution. The sugar content is present and honest. The whole grain content is real and primary. The product behavior, denser than conventional waffles, slightly chewier, less engineered softness, reflects the absence of the dough conditioners that every brand on the avoid list uses to approximate a texture that real ingredients would have produced naturally. Trader Joe's does not publish its supplier relationships. The supply chain transparency is limited by the private label model, but the ingredient standard the company applies to its private label products is publicly stated and independently verifiable through the ingredient list on the package. What you see is what is in the waffle. That should be a baseline across this entire category. In the context of everything above, it is rare enough to be a genuine differentiator. Best option number 2, Julian Bakery Paleo Waffles. Julian Bakery enters this list because it represents what happens when a brand is built around a specific commitment to ingredient integrity, rather than around a mainstream consumer market that will accept industrial formulation as long as the branding is warm enough. Julian Bakery Paleo Waffles contain almond flour, coconut flour, eggs, and coconut oil. The ingredient list reflects a product designed around what the paleo framework requires rather than around the manufacturing constraints of industrial frozen waffle production. There is no enriched flour because the consumer base for this product came to it specifically to avoid enriched flour. There is no high fructose corn syrup because the consumer base for this product came to it specifically because of the research on high fructose corn syrup. The ingredient list is the commercial commitment made visible. The glycemic response to a Julian Bakery Paleo Waffle is fundamentally different from every other product on this list. Almond flour and coconut flour behave differently in the body than refined wheat flour or even whole wheat flour processed and frozen for commercial distribution. For individuals managing blood sugar, insulin resistance, or type 2 diabetes who have been eating the organic whole grain waffles above them on this list believing they were making a medically supportive choice, the difference is not marginal. It is clinically meaningful. Julian Bakery publishes its testing. The company participates in third-party certification across multiple quality dimensions. The product costs more than everything on the avoid list. The cost is the almond flour, the coconut flour, the eggs, and the refusal to replace any of them with a cheaper industrial substitute when the supply chain makes that substitution available. Best option number 1. Liege-style waffles by Waffles and Dinges. Most people watching this have never heard of Waffles and Dinges. That is not a coincidence and it is not a problem. Waffles and Dinges began as a food cart operation in New York City,